Okay, good evening. We're about to adjourn the Holyoke Commission on Disability. It is March 27th, and we have with us tonight Counselor Israel Rivera as a guest. Members tonight look like Betty Larrabee, Jessica Lebron, Kelly Curran, our ADA officer, and Marlene Connor.
And Liana just wrote she won't be making it tonight.
Okay, and it looks like, unfortunately, Anna can't make it tonight. And there doesn't appear to be anybody from the public, so we will get started. So first of all, if I can have a motion to move the ordinance update on the agenda for our first item for the removal of handicap signs, since we have a guest here.
So moved. Second.
Second. Very good. All right. So Councilor Rivera is here tonight to talk with us about the handicap removal ordinance that we know the ordinance committee has been working on updating. And a couple of members and myself, Betty and I, have been to a couple of their meetings as they're processing it. But tonight we want to talk about kind of making that process a lot more efficient for the benefit of everybody, including DPW and those that need the signs removed. So I'm going to open it up and give it to Councilor Rivera first, and he can kind of tell us what they've been discussing in the ordinance committee about the sorts of things they're looking to change, and then we can open up to discussion with the counselors. I know Betty and I believe also Jessica in the past have offered some adjustments that I think we're all going to be on the same page for as well. So, Izzy, take it away.
Thank you. First of all, thank you guys for taking the time to make time for this. I know you guys already have a busy agenda. So this item was filed by Councilor Carmen Ocasio as well as Councilor Dave Bartley as a joint filing. It's something that came up in the beginning for me when I first started my term, almost 4 years ago now, believe it or not, where there's an awesome process, right, where you can apply, if eligible, to get a handicap space by or somewhere near your residence, right? The only thing that has continued to arise is that when people move, not everybody goes back to the clerk's office to let the clerk's office know to get the handicap signs removed. So what ends up happening is some streets get inundated with handicap signs, or if not, someone new moves in and can't actually park there and doesn't understand why the handicap sign is there. So we're at the council or the ordinance level trying to devise a way in collaboration with you guys as well as the clerk's office to see if there's a way to develop a list for what's already been given out in the community, and then after that keeping track of the list, and then seeing if there's a system where we can have people come periodically and continue to apply as if you were any other permit. Only because, let's say next year you don't need it, and you not because you don't need it, but because you move somewhere else, that would help with the process and make it easier, because the clerk's office doesn't have the capacity to call every individual applicant every year to say, hey, are you renewing this permit or whatnot? So it would be, the onus would be on the individual to come in, and this and again, this could be hashing it out and figuring out what's best for everyone, but some of the onus should more than likely fall on the individual once they receive the information of saying, hey, your handicap permit is up for renewal, right? Like, let's say they get the email, they get the message, the phone call. When it's up for renewal, it would be up to them to come up and fill out the paperwork and continue the renewal. So that way, the clerk's office doesn't have to continue chasing people down, but it also keeps a list together, and we understand where they're being placed, how many are out there, and if Carmen Ocasio, like she did this time, when she came in, she went around going individual handicap space in South Holyoke and matching them to individual applications, which took her a long time. It would be good to have like a spreadsheet that already has all that put together. So for me, it's like, what do you guys want to see as the Commission of Disabilities? Because I don't want to make that decision as an ordinance chair on my own. With like, there's a purpose for you guys, right? Like I really truly believe that. So I'm here to kind of like get suggestions from you guys and trying to figure out what you guys think it's best with regards to that. But at the same time, bringing some of this back to the clerk's office and talking to the clerk's office, what's reality? What is capacity with regards to work? And it's good that Kelly's here, so then she can actually break down what could be like.
Yeah.
What would be new duties added on, if there is, with regards to like keeping a list and tracking it and all
Right.
of this stuff? But like, I just wanted to give you guys that breakdown. Feel free to go ahead.
And all that sounds fairly reasonable. And I think what I'd like to do is give the mic a bit to Betty Larrabee, because she's been on this commission for over 20 years and has a better idea of the history of the process as well. And Betty, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a couple of the suggestions that you had put on, and then I'd love for you to comment, Betty, on what you think about in terms of what Councilor Rivera has said and how we can work this out. So,
Sure, go ahead.
So the first thing was that who will update the application form to include the notice. This document was originally written years ago by the commission and then approved by the law department. The second question is, how far back will the database cover, or is it just starting with new applications? So obviously that calendar, the timeline, and so we can maintain a consistency. The correspondence, the third one is the correspondence from the clerk, as you mentioned, will be in both English and Spanish, but the application is only in English. Does this document need to be translated? And if so, who will do it? Obviously, another really good approach that we have to consider. And then finally, if the clerk is annually sending a list of signs that have been removed to the council, does that also get recorded in the record of ordinances as a removal? So, Betty, something you'd like to add to any of that, or what Israel said?
I have, as Lynn said, been on this committee for almost 30 years, and in the past we have had very few removals until I want to say 5 or 6 years recently. And as you've said, Carmen Ocasio is the one that has done a tremendous job in her area removing unneeded signs. There have been very few councilors that have gone to the trouble that she has gone to find empty spaces. So I'd like to applaud her effort to begin with.
Yep.
I think Lynn has, outlined my concerns with this entire process. I know Councilor Bartley has indicated at several of your meetings that he's been working with the law department to get this kind of information in an ordinance, but for some reason in the past few months, nothing has happened with it. So I don't know where to go from here beyond what I've already stated as my concerns and questions that should be included in the ordinance as you develop it for future use.
If I may, Madam Chair?
And yeah, I
Go
just
ahead.
want to say one other thing, if you don't mind first, and that's just the commission, when we've discussed it before as a whole, we can't emphasize enough that we want to strike a balance between protecting our residents who are
Yes.
disabled, but we also know that particularly in the high-density parts of our city, that parking is a really
Right,
rare
limited.
commodity. And so to have those spaces not used or tied up for a long time is not something we want to see continue anyway. And I appreciate Betty bringing up, I know Carmen has done quite a lot.
I second the work that Carmen has done and the appreciation. Thank you, Betty, for serving for as long as you have too as well. And for the questions, thank you too. You can forward those questions to me and I can outline them and make sure that we can address them. I can actually answer a lot of those, but I'm not the mayor, so I have to talk to people and make sure that like in my thought process, how would it work? So like translation of the document, I'm surprised it's not translated yet, but we do have translators that are currently translating online that we pay. And so to me, it's like, can we have one of them translated? If we can't have one of them, the school department pays translators too as well. Can we partner with the school department and have them charge us whatever it costs to do the translation document? With regards to the keeping of the list or tracking of the list and how far back, I agree. There can only be a limit of how far back we can go. To me, it's like 5 years. But there is the thing of figuring out, and this would be a closer conversation with the clerk's office, if we're mailing out or emailing or communicating with people that we know for the last 5 years, because we're not going to go further than that, who are the people that have applied? Like, where do we find that? Is there a list already that exists that has people that have been approved? Is there a space where there's an Excel spreadsheet that have approvals already? Because that would be a place to start. And then say going back like we don't have to do 20 years, we don't have to do that, that's too far back. Let's start simple, start with 5 years or 3 years, depending on what the committee decides or what you guys decide. And then the last piece, Betty, the reason why I think for me it's taken so long to take it up again is because I wanted to have a conversation with you guys first. I didn't think it was, I truly believe in the process of government, and when I say that is there's a commission for a reason. Us at ordinance, we can chat, we can do whatever we want, but that's not our task. The task lies with you guys, and whatever suggestion or recommendation that comes from here is what I would literally want to run with, because for me, it's more important to have people that are serving in the role, right? I'm a policymaker, obviously, but that's because they say so. You guys are policymakers too, and I want to take the advice and the advantage of relying on you guys and allowing you guys to do the work. But as soon as we finish up the treasurer CAFO stuff, collectors, I'm going to take this up and move it forward. But it also allows us time to kind of communicate with the clerk's office and see how much more work would that add on. And then if it does add on more work to them, it's identifying that, right, and adding a monetary value to that. Kelly knows more about that with regards to human resources. If you know that it costs this much to do this much work, then maybe, I know Lynn said to me that there's never money in the budget for Commission of Disabilities, but if you can prove that you need someone to do this kind of work in collaboration with the clerk's office, then that would be an argument to ask for a couple dollars in the budget for the next time around. But again, send me the questions and I'll try to outline them and make sure that they're addressed when we do bring this up.
That all sounds great, and I always thought we were likely on the same mindset. It's just it's how it moves sometimes, and I guess first of all, is there any of the members virtually that have a comment?
Yes, Lynn, I do. I'd like to respond.
Go ahead, and then I think I heard Jessica or someone else, but go ahead, Betty.
Okay. Izzy, I'm responding to previous meetings that you've had over the past 6 months regarding information from the clerk's office that said they could easily do this with their current staffing because all of this information is already recorded in an ordinance when the city council grants an application for a handicap spot. So they would simply have to go back through an ordinance list and find the people that have a handicap spot to send out this information whether it's 5 or 3 or 10 years, whatever, they could easily do this with the current staffing. So there should not be additional cost regarding this process, according to information that they've already sent to your committee. The other thing is, yeah, 10 years is probably way too long to think about handicap spots, but 3 or 5 years would certainly be appropriate for most of the current handicap positions, applications and spots that are allowed within the city. As Lynn said, the density with some of our community areas is very important and should become the priority, but I'm not sure every city councilor, especially new people coming on, are aware of that issue. So again, it's a learning process for new people coming on to the city council. And again, training is an important thing for us as a commission as we talk year to year with different committees and general council members.
And
Thank you.
I appreciate that, Betty, and I would agree. It kind of brings up a point because obviously there is some connection there between the applications as well as the removal of the signs. And we've discussed Councilor Rivera a few times. I know that Betty herself and our former chair, Don, had come in and spoken to you all since you've been on city council about the process. And I think it would probably be a benefit, and we've talked about this again in the commission, to possibly have kind of a bullet list available for whether we have that in the clerk's office, or whether we can even post it in our information or on our Facebook page so people have some sense of where to even begin the process that, and then again, translation. But I think between all of us, we ought to be able to get this done pretty well. And I did want to say, Jessica, did you have something to ask?
I was just trying to get some clarification on the process of the application for handicap parking. It goes to the city council and then gets forwarded to us, or is it vice versa?
Vice versa, it's my understanding.
It goes to the clerk.
It goes to the
They
clerk
go to
first,
the
and the
clerk
clerk sends
first.
it to you guys.
Right,
And
and then,
No,
We file it.
no,
It
Well,
goes to the
we file an
city.
order.
it goes to the city
Right.
first, and then Jeffrey, and they have the application they submit to us. Then it has to go through us for the approval, then we send that back,
Right.
and they send it back to you all.
Okay, so my suggestion is that if that's the process and it gets approved on our end and it goes back to the city, moving forward, like with the new applicants, like revise the information handed to them, like this is and this is just a suggestion, like periodically keep your email updated, because here's the case where everyone moves, you can't track them down by mail or phone. Keep your, by email, it's a lot more efficient, like periodically, let's say every 6 months, every year, send out an email stating, do you still need the parking or not? I'm just trying to think, to make the process better, because I agree with what Izzy said. There has to be a better process, and we just have to work in collaboration with the city clerk to figure out what works best and more efficiently. The way I'm thinking is we can't go back too many years, maybe 5, follow up with an email, do you still need this parking or not? Moving forward with the new applicants, let them know with this approval, you have to periodically keep us updated if you still need the parking or not. We can work, this is just a suggestion, in collaboration with the city clerk, like maybe we can get the list wherever it's located, however it's located, and and I'm not speaking for the whole commission, like to help out with the list and send out the emails to the applicants, to the people that currently have the parking space, if I make sense, to have a better flow, a better system.
Kelly, the microphone.
I feel like there should be like a date, like 2 years or 3 years
Right.
or 5 years,
Yeah.
like you recert or.
And again, to Jessica's point and to your point, I threw 1 year out as a renewal just to throw it out there. Again, I believe that you guys are a commission, that those decisions, we can finalize and put it into policy at the ordinance level, but the power lies with you guys to design and do all of that. This is why it's taken so long for me to do this meeting. I understand they've presented and they gotten information from the clerk's office, but I've also spoken to the clerk's office and they've expressed to me that some of this is just filed and that there is no clarification. So like to me is trying to find out what is the real life process, right? Like can you produce a list, an Excel spreadsheet right now and tell me who has them for the last 5 years and who doesn't? And if you can, great, then let's start sending them emails and saying, hey, whatever you guys decide, right? If you guys decide we want them to recertify every 2 years, every 3 years, every year, we can do that at the council level. We can do that. That is true. We can do that. But again, I feel like then it will be the point of the Disabilities Commission, right? Your job is to kind of advise us on the policies and the regulations that you're trying to put together, and we follow through and do that piece. The other thing is that we approve it after you guys have approved it, right? So if you guys approve a handicap space and if you send it forward to the council and you say yes, we're going to say yes. If you send it to the council and you say no, we're going to say no. So the reality is, in that process of saying yes and no, whether it's in the clerk's office or whether it lies with the Commission of Disabilities, someone should be keeping track of who's saying yes and who's saying no, right? And what are the criterias of saying yes, right? And maybe in a large density area like South Holyoke, I can only give you so many parking spaces within a framed area. Who's going to do the work to figure that out, right? Like us at the ordinance committee, we're just going to vote yes or no whether we approve of the policy, right? Someone has to do that legwork and figure out how many spaces within a certain amount of footage do you want to do, just so that way you are being equitable and not just flat out saying no more handicapped parking on this street when somebody might need it, right? So like it's just trying to figure out those little smaller nuances in collaboration with us and the clerk's office, so that way we can all work together and figure out what's best for everyone and make it an equitable situation. Because I don't use the handicap spaces, but my mom and my mother-in-law, well, my mom doesn't yet, but she will soon. But my mother-in-law does, and ultimately, I would like for them to have their handicap spaces, and it makes sense to have it, right? But if there are too many in one particular space, and then all of a sudden a blanket no comes across the board, there has to be like a justification for that. But I wish.
We definitely have a justification. I mean, when we discuss this and when we go through the information.
No, but if we made a policy where it's just on one street altogether,
Yeah.
what is that justification for that policy? Because that's what we're going to vote on, right? I think that's the part for me, is trying to hash out all those smaller details. I see what you're saying. There's unintended consequences once we create a policy.
Yeah.
And I don't want someone to come back later on and say, well, that's not what we meant. That's not what we wanted to happen. So, it's trying to figure out and map out what makes sense.
And that's absolutely why we're here and why we wanted to speak with you, because we absolutely agree that there should be a consistency and a logic to it. And it's also making me think, now that we're doing our comp plan in the city, which I'm a part of that, and also that there is a lot of discussion about parking, and of course with the new development projects on High Street, for instance, and other places, that might be something to present to them when we are all making a plan about how we are going to develop and in what neighborhood and how it's going to be, to include those kind of things like handicap spots, because parking is a huge issue, certainly to the people that we represent, but it is in general in Holyoke too. So that could be a great source. Also, those are the folks that are going to have the maps and some of the density charts and a good feel for averages that the state or the nation even uses when they're trying to allot handicap spots. Obviously, with illness, not just aging, you can never know. There are people that are seriously ill for a short time, but because of where they live, and in situations like we're talking about where there is already a difficulty as a healthy person finding a parking spot, then when you're going through chemo treatment, for instance, if we can do that and they fill out their applications, there's enough in those applications, and we're sensitive enough, we can keep a consistency but still allow for a flexibility on some of those things, but we can't always know exactly how many we're going to get or where it's going to be, even outside of demographics of having currently the largest aging population we've ever had. But again, I think it's time to do it, as all cities discover that things change and there can be new ways to get that information. And certainly, thanks to computers, we should be able to get some of that in a spreadsheet, as you said, from someone, either us or the clerk's office should be able to put together something that we can be able to refer in a 3 to 5 year basis. But I think we're on the same track, and we'll stay in communication, which is really the most important thing. And Izzy, I will definitely send these questions and any that anybody else comes up with, and we can dialogue back and forth on some of that, and then we'll of course bring it back up at the next meeting. Or and please, if it's helpful, have us come into ordinance.
Yeah, I have no issues
Some
with
point.
that too
Yeah.
as well. I think.
You might want to wait until we get some of this organized.
That's what I was going to
Fine.
say.
Yeah.
If anything, I'll wait until I get a communication from you guys to put it back on the agenda. But I think for next steps would make sense with you guys if you could do that bullet list that you mentioned, and then just the questions, like the ones that Betty had sent, and if there's any other ones that arise, that way at that next meeting we can try to address those, hash that out, and then I can send some of those to the clerk's office to see if any of that she can answer them too as well, and just to think about what for us to brainstorm it, and then it's trying to get this done by June possibly. You know what I mean? At least the legal language, and then get something done by June, so that way. And I say June only so that way we have a deadline and
No,
that we meet it.
I personally agree that, and again, for most commissions, all of us have many things coming, and
Right.
if we can pace it and our amount of staffing, it certainly helps us.
Yep.
So having that deadline is great. Anybody else? Betty?
Yes, one more thing. Thinking of the applications that get approved by the commission and then by the ordinance committee, everything has to go to the city engineer for specific lines on a street on where the parking space will be. Do we need to consider that as the way to negotiate what streets do or do not get additional parking spaces? And is it then the city engineer in a densely populated area that says no to further parking spaces? We have not considered that in the past or even discussed that as an option, but that may be a route to
Yeah.
control some of the parking spaces in densely populated areas.
And it might be worthwhile, it's a good point,
good
to
point,
possibly,
Betty.
maybe Kelly has a contribution here to bring in our new engineer, We don't have, my understanding is DPW head, but somebody from DPW as well possibly, as we start formulating some of this in case we're leaving. Because definitely application, we all know vision is one thing, but application and the labor and who's going to do it is important too. So I really appreciate you coming out. Anybody else, or we good on that, I think? And we will stay in touch. Definitely, I'll send you those
Thank you
questions.
guys for your time.
Thanks for
Thank you,
coming
Missy.
in.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks so much. Yeah, you too. All right, I'm going to go back on the agenda. I will start with, first of all, approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right. So do we need to actually vote on that or just say, did everybody get them here? They should have. Sarah did send this out.
Yes, I received it.
Okay, so we all have it. Okay, so approval for the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm abstaining because I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay. All right, abstention from Betty, everybody else, aye. All right, minutes approved from our February meeting. Now on to old business. So, a couple of things. One thing that came up actually just in the last week I wanted to let you all know is you remember the state bill that we supported and wrote a letter of support for Massachusetts increasing parks that are accessible. Sadly, the bill itself didn't pass, but they were able to work something out with one of their newer state departments of recreation. The day after our last election, they had a walk, if you all remember, and some of us went out there. A lot of our legislators were there, both in county and state. And let us know that they actually have developed a team that is going to continue with that. Even though technically the bill itself didn't pass, they are going to direct efforts and combine them with the State Recreation Department in addition to parks and also the Appalachian Mountain Club to maintain these trails and expand them. And I did get a message this week from Meg Bandera, who runs the All Trails group, and she said they are going to actually put the bill out again this spring, I believe, spring or summer in legislation. And so she was asking if we would like to resubmit the letter we sent or write a new one in support. So I think probably the easiest thing would be to use the same letter that we compiled last time, and I think that I would probably add, in the current situation with many national parks under duress from the current I'm trying to be very diplomatic about this, but the reduction in staff across the nation. For instance, I know that in Hadley, because my husband worked there, that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is scheduled, that entire group of people is scheduled to close down in that office in August, and they are responsible for 75 wildlife refuges and in 13 states. So we are going to see a diminishment of outdoor recreation as it is anyway. So my only addition to that letter would be, in these current times now more than ever, it seems a really important activity, good for psychological health, good for physical health, and a way to still show pride in our state and country, so that once again we endorse this bill. So anybody else have comment?
I would just support what you suggested, and think that that makes the addition of making sure that we're, as we look at the Massachusetts resources, understand them in the greater context of all the issues that'll be happening. So I think we should mention that as well.
That sounds good. Well, anybody, easier way, any disagreement here about sending the letter on or resending?
No.
Okay. All right. Next. So, the police department update, we got a little bit of, well, we got some really good news from Kelly, but Kelly, is there, I guess it's good for us to announce that to the public as well in terms of the update on the police department handicap doors.
Yeah, so I don't have the technical terms, but there was a problem with the doors themselves that would delay adding the handicap accessible pieces to it. So that part was fixed by Holyoke Lock. And within the next 3 weeks, another company will be will be adding the packages for the handicap accessible buttons. And it sounds like there's going to be like some kind of remote feature available. And it was under budget, under what we thought it was going to cost.
Yeah,
That's really
that
good.
was pretty
Yeah.
amazing to see. And that included the electrician, because it sounded like that was going to be the really costly part.
I don't know. On the quote that I read, it didn't look like electrical work was in there, but I could be wrong. I'll double check.
Yeah. And he's estimating starting in 2 to 3
Yeah, the
weeks?
gentleman that wrote back to Matt Peterson said, since you're local, I'll be able to do it within the next 3 weeks. He didn't say like next week or next Friday. He just said within the next 3 weeks. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And then all that I would ask is he gives us a heads
Yeah,
up once
I did
they
ask
have
him,
the
yeah,
actual
I said
date.
we'll go over and check it out when it's complete.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. That'll be a fun photo op. And mission accomplished is always good too, so thanks for that. Anybody else? All right, then let's see. Let's go ahead and go on to, so we have applications for a handicap HP sign that we have actually looked at. When we first got it, it was not, the application was not filled out. I can't tell if someone's speaking or that's interference with somebody. Okay. So this would be, let's see, yes, this was Ward 4, sent by Counselor Givner, and the application address, let's see. So the applicant was Yolanda Velazquez, and she has filled it out. And you all, I sent this out to you all again with the application filled out that Jeffrey Anderson Burgess sent us, and with the doctor, but also her issue, like a lot of these places, was that while there is a driveway with this home, she's on the top floor, I believe it was, two-story home. The landlord lives there and did sign off in saying that the landlord is the one using the driveway. So Ms. Velazquez has to have off-street parking. And it, again, is one of those situations where that's difficult to find. There's also a photograph of the place there, so we know what it looks like. So as far as I can see, there doesn't seem to be a problem here. Anybody else?
Lynn, when did you send that out? I have never seen that.
Let's see if I have a date on it. Would have been probably around March 12th.
What is the address on that application?
It is 120 Oak.
120 Oak. Thank you.
So Jeffrey's notice to me was on the 12th, and I sent it out within a couple days, I think, to you all as well. And it is, I think it's one, didn't we review this before and send it back because it did not have everything filled out?
No, that's a different person at a different address. It just happens to be the same
yeah.
first name.
Yeah, so this was February.
What was February?
When she first submitted it.
Oh, okay.
So it's stamped February 26th, or 5th, excuse me.
Was that when city clerk received it or the city council?
That looks like, this is, this is on the application stamped by the city clerk.
Clerk, okay.
And that also corresponds with the date she's got written on it. And then, for some reason, and it must have been, maybe that's where when it wasn't filled out entirely, it was sent back because my email didn't come from Jeffrey until March 12th.
How do you know it wasn't filled out if we haven't seen it until March 12th?
Well, it's, again, I have all the copies printed out that should have been in an email sent to everybody.
I don't think I find a copy in my emails either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm searching, I don't have it either.
Right. I think you're confusing it with the other one that we previously received because the same Yolanda name is listed.
Yeah, I know, but that's a whole different location. I know what you're referring to, Betty, but
Right.
no, I don't think that's what it is. And I'll have to go look at my emails and look it up and see when I sent it out to you all.
Has anyone gone to this site to look at the property?
I have not. And again, I just got this mid-March. So, and that's what makes me think, let me look back at my emails. I have my laptop here and see if I can find it.
And if we need someone to go out and look, I would be happy to be that person.
And I did tell Jeffrey that since they didn't get to us till mid-March either, that we would look and talk about it on the next meeting, so he knows. Let me look up. So I tell you what, while I'm looking to see where I have that on my email, I'd like to also, while we're at it and looking at these, wait a minute, I've got it now. Yeah, I'm having trouble with my laptop tonight, so I'll have to,
If I may say,
have to
I'm
wait till I
looking
get
up the
home.
property now.
I'm
I've never
sorry?
seen this property before, but I'm looking at the
You can-
landscape of it. The driveway, if the owner is using it, it only has room for 2 vehicles, as what I'm looking at now. And then the property sits on right where the stop sign would be. It looks like a very populated street.
Yeah, it
Um,
definitely, well, when you look at the
it-
map, you can see the
Yeah.
density there, and that, if you read her application, she describes that as well. And also, she does have the photograph of the building itself, which is also in there. And and again, the landlord signed it. And I know I saw somewhere, because I saw the same first name on another applicant too, a few months ago, Betty, that also had not filled out, had similar circumstances and same first name, but this is a different ward, so.
Right. But again, we haven't seen that application to know the
Yeah,
information that we have.
I'm really wishing I could get my laptop, because I sure hope you all have been getting my multiple of emails, because I don't always get responses. And I did also send out 2 variances, or 1 variance, as well as a variance with an upcoming hearing associated with it,
Right.
for the
I've
parking lot.
received those, but not this application.
Yeah, that's worrisome. Okay, well, I can't do much about that now.
Could you resend them and we could?
Oh, yeah, I'll definitely resend them. I won't be able to do it now. As I said, I can't, for
yeah.
some reason, get my laptop functioning. But again, that is the basic issue. And in terms of our last meeting, or last 2 meetings, where we changed officers, and then with two of our needed members, sick, going through surgery, Betty and Leanna discussed possibly being able to do something. Betty, better communicator on that, telling us, and here she is today, which we're glad to see, that she could, at least, she's not allowed to drive, I don't think, for a bit. And so, but she told us that if she was up to it and we needed the help, she would certainly be glad to ride with someone who could drive, and Marlene has offered to do that. Leanna has too, but I have not heard from Leanna since probably end of January, beginning of February. So I don't know what's going on there. So if I will send that email out tonight, actually, and then you two can possibly put your heads together and schedule something, or I can certainly ride with someone. The problem is, not everybody can carry my chair. And I can drive. Now that the ice is gone, it won't be a problem for me to do drive-bys on these things. But when it's ice and snow, it's always going to be a difficult thing for me to find not only a parking place, but one that will allow me in those parts of Holyoke, that will allow me to put the ramp out so I can get out and actually see. So we have to kind of do a tag team effort on that. That would be great if you guys could correspond with each other on that one, and I'll send that one out tonight. On the variances,
Let's finish this
Where do you
and
wanna get
say
the-
we're tabling this at the moment until
All
our
right.
next meeting.
okay. So, motion to table this then for this particular handicapped application on
So moved?
Second.
okay.
And Betty, if you're up for it next week, I'm happy to coordinate with you on a time.
Sounds good. Thank you, Marlene.
Okay. So my variances. So we'll take the true variance first for, this is 174 Lyman, 95 Maple. You all said you had received this then? Okay, good. At least we got that going. And in that it is, from what I can tell, it is, I have not driven except by the front side of it. It's a large rectangular building. You can also see in that by photographs as well. It is set up to be, it is a completely gutted building. And the owner out of Westfield, I believe, is going to make apartments out of it. There will be under 19 apartments, which is relevant because by law, with the ADA law, there can be an exception of not giving them a variance if there are 19 units or above. But if they're under, excuse me, let me retrace that. There's an exception if there are under 19 apartments, and he says there's 14. So I believe there's 4 on the bottom floor with a storefront. The storefront is accessible, but the apartments are not. And so he's also claiming the other exemption being that the cost to make them accessible would be over the 30% required by law of the assessment of the building. And you will also see in the emails I sent that there's an update. Someone from the architectural board asked what the assessment was because he did not put it in the original application, but then he updated that. So, any questions that you all can see about it? These things always concern me, as we've talked about. I never want to rubber stamp something. We obviously have to abide by the law, but gee, I wish that some of these landlords and developers had an ethic to at least make a couple of those units downstairs accessible. From what I can tell, it looks like there's only 3 steps to get in. There's one in the back of the building, one in front, and I believe one on the side doorways. And it wouldn't take that much to put a ramp in there for those first floor apartments. Definitely does not look like something they can afford to do an elevator in. But that's kind of my assessment of it right now. I don't really know what else that we can add, but anybody else comment?
I was concerned that they were doing what I assume is the old building that had the paint store on Maple Street and the bakery on Lyman Street. Am I at the right corner thinking of that building for some of the older residents in Holyoke?
I believe so. I'm
I
not
think
sure.
it is, but I need, again, we need to do a
I'm
drive-by.
not sure if the
on this one.
bakery was on it, but it is the store. It is the building directly across from that corner store. So
Right, okay,
yeah,
that's
It's
what
the
I'm
corner
thinking.
store and the park is right across the street.
yeah.
Right, okay, same area then, all right. I'm concerned that they have no parking spaces allowed for this facility. Are they assuming everyone is just going to grab a space on the street?
That's a good question. I thought it had a parking lot in the back.
It looks like it has a parking lot. So I
Yeah,
went over the
it's got one in
plans,
the
but I couldn't tell by the plans. But when I look at that building, there's a lot on the side, and then there looks like there's a small lot in the back. I don't know if it's parking or just
So-
space. But
But wouldn't it need to be,
So-
wouldn't there need to be accessible parking spaces at whatever
yeah,
lot they're setting up?
we can do a drive-by.
But the
So,
application
it's spider a lot?
the application specifically says no parking spaces.
And I was just gonna say that it looks like that empty parking lot could, it's being used by the car garage next to it.
Well, that is a drive-by I can do, I know that I can get in there. If anybody wants to come with me, we can set up a date to actually go by. And this one, again, is fairly new, as you saw. That one came in March 21st, too. So I don't feel, that we have to rush through in a negative way. I think it definitely deserves a little bit of, scrutiny.
I agree. I mean, I think we ought to spend a minute looking at
All
this.
right,
And look at-
Yeah, a second question I have
Yeah.
is regarding the fire escape on the front of the building. They said they're going to remove that fire escape, and the only exits from the building will be the two stairways at the opposite ends of the building. So, entrance and egress issues, safety areas during fires, evacuations, things of that sort would be a concern for me.
Yeah, and again, then we have to discuss where is our responsibility in that, and it's interesting, wasn't this the one, because there was someone from the fire department commenting on these too.
Yeah, they'll have to get permits from all of the
Right.
people before they can get a variance from the state.
Right. Yeah, I think, I absolutely think first, from our perspective in terms of accessibility, there are not going to be accessible apartments in there.
Right.
And so I don't know how much more we can do other than just to point out safety in general. Certainly if you have a business there and you've got people coming into that business, that most needs to be accessible, as well as accessible parking and safe exits too in the event of fire.
Right. Well, the application says the business will have an accessible door and an accessible bathroom. And the application
Right.
says their laundry rooms on the second and third floor will be accessible.
Accessible.
But what use is that if the apartments
If
aren't
you can't
accessible?
get up there, I know, yeah. Well, certainly, I wish there was a way that, a way, again, that we could motivate people to at least, like I said, there are 3 steps to get up there. Having ramps myself and having to do investigation, and even in my home, for them, it seems like a really worthwhile endeavor to at least make those 4 apartments downstairs accessible from one of those entrances. I don't know, maybe that's something to talk to housing about as well, how they go about that, if they want to encourage new businesses or new landlords to start thinking about those things. That's a possibility too. But
Yeah,
legally,
I'm thinking about a variance that was issued, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago for a place in the bottom of Kendrick Street by the Capri, where they actually did a ramp in the back to allow first floor accessibility.
Yeah.
So something like that has been done in the past with this variance. It might be worth looking into that
Yeah.
to see if that applies to this specific.
I think that would be great, Betty. Again, I feel like that our job is to obviously abide by the law, but also I think to encourage business owners that come in here to think about disabled residents and disabled patrons, frankly, so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, it makes sense, not just, I mean, even from a temporary basis. I mean, there's plenty of people that have need for accessibility on a temporary basis. You need a knee replaced, you need a hip replaced. I mean,
Right, it's
there's
an asset.
mothers with
Yeah.
baby strollers. I mean, there's
Right.
just a whole lot of reasons why there needs
good
to be
point.
more thought to universal access.
Right. Any of us that ever chosen apartments, you know, there's a reason that even able-bodied people will choose a first floor, say, opposed to a upstairs. So, yeah, it would be nice if we can find a way to encourage that, I think. So let's do more discussion on this, and I will drive by there if anybody would like to
Sign me
come
in.
with me. Okay, Marlene will
Sign
do
me in.
that trip too, and report back to you all at the commission in the meantime. Okay, so we table this for further discussion then?
Yes,
Second.
Have a second? Okay, we will table that. And updates coming on our next meeting at the end of April. Then the next one we have, and Betty, I'm hoping in your longer knowledge you can help me with a little bit. So this is a notice that we received on literally yesterday, that Kelly found out about. It was sent to Don, our former chair, by mistake, and it is a notice of a variance hearing. So you all got that? Everybody did get that one too as well, I hope.
yep,
Okay, so it seems pretty short and
When?
sweet.
Yesterday?
I'm sorry?
Yesterday?
yes.
Yeah. Yesterday. That I sent it.
Yeah, I can
Wednesday,
speak to this.
it came in.
Um,
Go ahead, I'm
several
sorry,
years-
Jessica.
Several years ago, the city was notified that the parking garage on Dwight Street was having major issues because of accessibility and elevator and stairwells and all kinds of improvements that were needed. And a variance was required, which this commission at that time approved.
That's right.
And some of the work was done, others hasn't been. I don't have complete understanding of the scope of work that was and was not done. But this is now a follow-up from the state regarding a hearing that's going on for that variance. So obviously it's been in process for several years and is still going forward. We have nothing to do with it at this point because the commission approved the variance in the past. We are Don was notified because he was the chair at that time, and we're just being put on notice that a meeting is being held, and if we want to appear or speak against it, we're welcome to do that. Excuse me.
Yeah, that sounds my recollection too, because I thought this was the one where they were saying there really wasn't much they could have done anyway. And so that was good clarity. So for all I needed to know, Betty, and I appreciate that being new at this part, that we are not required to go.
Right.
But they are required to notify us, and certainly if we have some reason for interest, we can certainly attend it. Is that correct?
Correct.
But otherwise, nothing else to
Right.
really discuss. Anybody else?
Nope.
So I would put this down just as notified. We understand that we've been notified, and that's all we're required to do at this point.
Right.
Okay. So, what was that, Kelly? I know. I smelled it as soon as
Yeah.
I came in. I don't like those either. All right, so I guess that's anybody else on old business, and we'll move on quickly.
Did you want to talk about?
Well, we want to do the budget, so I guess that really is old business. We have some new developments in it, but we started discussing the possibility of creating a budget among our commission members a few months ago, and so there have been some updates. And the way I'd like to talk about it is kind of break it down just into 2 points for where we are to try to expedite it, so we're not here all night, but we're giving it its due diligence. So first of all, in terms of a city budget, we have met with Jessica and myself have met with Mayor Garcia and discussed the beginnings of why we think we need a budget and where it might be coming from, and what the possibility was, and hoping for his support in that. It was a pretty good meeting, but we were talking basically generalities. And at that time, I also, and so we kind of established a committee of on the budget, which is composed of myself, Jessica, and Marlene, and Kelly as our city officer and ADA officer. And what we've kind of been doing for everybody else to know is dividing up first the services and itemized budgets that of areas of service or goods that we believe that we could utilize and help through a budget and in compliance with Massachusetts Office of Disability. Jessica wrote a wonderful professional proposal based on the legalities of what it allows us to do with those funds in combination with state law, and presented that to Mayor Garcia. And we talked about individual items. Since then, Jessica and Marlene and I have been talking, as well as Kelly, about individual categories for that first proposed budget for fiscal year 2025. And we have kind of put it into, and I kind of tried to do it in a way that each of us kind of was delegated to a particular subject. So Marlene, being our former transit authority and authority on transportation and all such good things for accessible transportation, she's been looking into those issues. Jessica has written the general proposal, as I said before, but she's also been looking into some of the specifics as well. I have asked her if she would like to be treasurer, because we are going to need a treasurer. She's debating that. Like all of us, she has other responsibilities as well, but she's got a good head for it. I think she would be great, and I don't think it's going to take too much exorbitant time from her, especially after we get it going. And then I myself have been looking into one of the things that we can do that the state definitely supports is helping disabled students, both with goods and services. And I myself have talked to Jeff Dugan at MOD 3 times about this, and also the second part of what I want to talk with you all about is establishing what's called an independent budget for us. Both these kind of budgets and approaches are going to come from the funds created in our city by the collection of fines on violation of handicap parking. So the first thing I did was to ask the mayor's office about, in the last 5 years, what sort of fines and amounts have we accumulated in the last 5 years? And have given that information to both Marlene and to Jessica, and I can send it out also to the full commission as well. But Marlene and I have really scrutinized that. There were about 850 tickets just for handicap violations, some years more than others. But we roughed out the math. Each ticket is a $300 charge. Not all tickets that they get, some of the tickets they don't actually pursue because there's some supposedly legitimate reason why they don't follow through. I myself have had incorrectly given handicap parking tickets. Parking out of state, it doesn't matter if you have the plates, they're good anywhere. So they had to withdraw that. So there can be some good reasons why they don't do that, but there was a fair amount of them. And then actually getting and collecting the fines. So it's not always 850 tickets times 300, for instance. So Marlene and I did the calculations, and an average would be around $36,000 a year. So we have a right by the state, anyway, to actually access all of that. And we talked to the mayor about that as well, and the sorts of things that we could do with it. So right now, the categories that we have listed, which I also will send out to you all, start off with, first of all, the needs of the commission, which is also listed under the state items of those things. And under that, the survey would come in, for instance. That's a process that the commission would do, a need they have in order to understand better who they actually serve. So that could be helpful in any printing costs, the actual survey tools we might use, etc. The only other thing I added to that category specifically was a microphone and possibly a small speaker, because we have discussed when we do the survey that we want to go into the community more and let them know we're here and what we do, and to find out what their needs are so that we can really write up an accurate survey by going into some of the other community groups, the nonprofits, etc. And I got to tell you, from all the events I've been to recently in Holyoke, don't assume they have a microphone. Kind of takes me back to the old AV days when I was a teacher in the public school system. It's really going to be important for us to go in, for us to be able to be heard in groups as well. So I think it'd be a very inexpensive but nice additional thing for the commission to have. But those are the kind of services under the first category. The next category I think that we had was transportation, and I kind of generalized it to accessible transportation in terms of the budget item, keeping it kind of generalized on purpose because that can expand a lot. So in transportation, what we've discussed is something we've already met with Neve once or twice over at the executive director of the Council on Aging. And we've talked to her now at length about the sort of accessible sorts of things that they do have. Betty, I don't know if you heard from the last meeting that discussion, but it was interesting. What did she call it, Marlene? That the type of transportation that she has witnessed there for at least the last 10 years has been kind of like a door-to-door,
Right.
sort of with sedans and not accessible sedans. So clearly they don't have an accessible transportation service. So there does seem to already, it seems obvious to someone who's disabled, but maybe not to others, that especially with an aging population, that disability chance increases, that they may not be serving everybody. And so we had given them information from the East Hampton Council on Aging, who gave, I used to work there as the activities director years ago, and they gave me a wonderful kind of summation of how they pieced together their accessible thing, including use of the PVTA, as well as drivers and things like that. So we talked more about that, Betty, at the commission meeting, and Neve seemed...
I saw your notes.
Yeah, okay. Mostly, supportive and would like to, of course, see more information. I'm wondering how the folks downtown who can't afford mobility vans and things like that, how much they either want to also access the Council on Aging or can't. It might be a combination, but we hope to investigate that more. And so other than that, that is not something we can completely fund all of, but we can certainly be a good support in it. And Marlene, the only other thing we considered too is any sort of transportation needs that our disabled residents may need in a more singular basis, maybe through public health in terms of getting to vaccine locations or medical care or things like that. In the past, Marlene has said Medicaid has helped to fund those kind of transportation accessibility issues quite a lot, but we know that's in danger of getting funding gutted pretty well too. So Marlene, anything you want to add to that?
I would just say that I have had a couple of conversations with a person from the PVTA who coordinates with the different communities on the different services and programs that they provide to the different cities and towns in the valley. And, they have access to certain amounts of federal money on a capital basis that they do make available to its member communities through a program or a partnership or an arrangement. Clearly, the commission is not going to want to operate services, but we could partner potentially with the senior center or with the PVTA. So there are examples of things that we could do. What currently happens in the city for individuals with disabilities is you can call the ADA paratransit line for PVTA, and they will schedule a trip to pick you up and bring you someplace, but they would only do that in a way that mirrors the fixed route. So not the entire city isn't covered by that kind of an arrangement. There's likely pockets of the city that don't have fixed route bus service. So even if you're a person with disabilities, the ADA paratransit program would not work for you. And I do know that the Medicaid has significantly funded transportation for the last 30 years. For folks that are on Medicaid, there's transportation available that they pay for people to go to medical appointments, and that all is going to go away. So their needs that people have now are going to, I would say, increase substantially over the next few years, and the PVTA has indicated an interest in seeing what we know and how to work with us, and gave me some information about timing on their grants and things like that. So, work in progress.
Yeah, though certainly there's a need, and going to increase, unfortunately, but maybe that is a way that we can be somewhat helpful in the time to come. Anybody else on transportation or anything related?
Question, Lynn.
Yes.
In order for this commission to get the money from a handicap parking tickets. The city council needs to pass an ordinance.
Yeah,
to
I'm
allow that to
actually going to
happen.
get to that when I talk to the
Okay.
independent. Yeah, I know, believe me, and again, there's well, I'll get to that in just a minute. The final one is for aid to students, not the final one, but the third one, aid to students who are disabled, which I mentioned. And I have talked myself to Anna Regali, who is a counselor and been involved in the public school system, someone I have a lot of admiration. I've worked on projects with her myself. She has a good feel for the entire school system and directed me to several people that I could talk to get an idea of the specifics that children in special education need. And that is actually listed in MOD as one of the top components that they like to support through these budgets, both in services and items. And then finally, the fourth is, and by the way, as we know, with the demise of the Department of Education, who doesn't fund entirely federally in our public education, they do fund a really, really large part of special education needs. And those children are already going to be hit by Medicaid cuts and SNAP cuts. So it seems like anything we can do to help our kids in this school system that are disabled, that should be definitely included. Fourth is accessible city buildings that serve community. So we've already started that. And I'm going to kind of be honest with you about that particular item for a couple reasons. In my lengthy discussions with Jeff Dugan in terms of state process and law and what is actually an allowable use for these funds, certainly building accessibility is there. But this kind of leads me into the next group where we're talking about the actual independent budget. And I gave to the committee members, and I will go ahead, I just didn't have time today. And I kind of wanted to introduce what we were doing to the full commission, Betty, today, and not knowing whether you would make it or Leanna. There is basically a really wonderful Bible on actually the process. Obviously, there's the information from MOD, but this comes from an organization that they work with a lot, and it actually is really wonderful because it gives you a blow-by-blow description. I think it'd be great for everybody to have because this is a big endeavor. And it will change as time goes on too. But they not only go through each of the legalities that you have to follow and the process, but how you begin it in the process. And it's really filled with some really good common sense. And it also gives examples under each of these sections from other individual municipal commissions on disabilities in different towns and how they did it and what their experience was that I found really helpful. So I'll definitely make sure I get that out to everybody. But it does, of course, and Jeff had told me the first step would be to get that order from the city council and approval. I don't think, I would hope we don't have too much trouble. Jeff also volunteered to come down and talk with city council and us absolutely any time that we felt we might need some support or information. So I thought that was great. He was just the most communicative I could have expected him to be and very supporting of me. But in terms of that, we have to, yeah, that's the first step, really. The first step is to be talking about this and to itemize and start thinking about the subject areas you're going to do. And all I want to say about the first item in terms, number one, of just going through those 4 categories that I mentioned, that we can keep them generalized. And Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but from everything I know about it, nobody knows exactly what their incoming money is going to be year to year, nor do we know how many fines will necessarily be collected and received. And so all we need to do is just kind of have those bottom basic categories listed, which I think we're about there on, and a basic amount. And then we can take that, and we have a meeting scheduled, Kelly and I and Marlene and Jessica with the mayor, and I'm guessing possibly, who is our, now I'm blanking, not on our auditor, I think, who's usually there, Tanya, on April Fool's Day. I hope that's a good sign, with him from 1 to 2 on April Fool's Day. So we'll be able to report back to the commission about more information after that. But I know I'm kind of jumping back and forth a little bit between these 2 items, but I really would like to be able to be everybody in on these 4 categories. If ever is, I guess that's what I'm asking is anybody here, or is anybody, does everybody agree on those 4 categories? Is there something I'm missing? Because I would kind of like to vote on that tonight so we can go in agreement with whatever you decide tonight to the mayor on Monday. So does anybody have any contribution there, or with those 4 categories, or have we missed anything, or?
No.
I can't hear yes or no.
Everything sounds good with those
Okay.
categories until we get city council approval
Right.
and an ordinance.
Right.
We're speed.
Yeah, we know that, Betty, obviously. So the next thing then is, and I have already spoken to one counselor already about it. She seems to think that we would have easy 7 and possibly more. You never know. But in the process, again, if you look at that, and that is going to be part of our persuasion with them, is going to be those 4 items. So it is important to have that somewhat in our minds, that we're not just shooting in the dark here. We have some real needs and some real ideas, and we also know where the money is. And by the way, this money has been going into the general fund for some time. And so there is great encouragement from the state for us to try to do this. I can think of 7 city councilors that are likely to be in agreement. But again, I really like this write-up that I'm going to send to everybody else, but that I sent to Jessica and Marlene as well, but to also send to Sarah, is they really have a great approach. So one thing that they suggest, and I'd already talked, I think, to some of our budget committee members about, is approaching the police, because they are the ones that enforce and go to the trouble to write up these tickets, and we want to encourage them to do that with violators. And so they really discuss in preparation for this that it's a really good idea to talk to the police department first about what we're planning and how we want to support them in some way in them doing their work of enforcement, and why we think it would be a benefit to everyone. Patty Devine tells me that she really likes our new police chief. I've certainly heard a lot about him, but I'm going to recommend that we probably meet with him pretty soon, like really soon, and see how he feels about that. All of this being, again, in preparation for when we go before City Council, that we have really thought this out from vision to application to enforcement. So that there's going to be hardly a reason to reject that. It is possible that there will be someone who's afraid that they're going to be losing out. Somebody's been using this money, but from what I can tell, from talking with Mayor Garcia, it goes into a general fund, and short of the police doing the enforcement part, I'm not really sure that that's delineated enough anywhere to really know where those specific fines actually go. It gets dumped in the general fund. So I think we go in hoping for the best and planning for obstacles. And that's what we're going to do. And I am going to start contacting the city councilors I know and tell them what we're proposing. But I do think the next step is to talk to law enforcement about that part. And Josh has made himself very available to us through this, and he's got a much larger budget to deal with coming up. So that's the other reason I'm trying to get moving on this fast. Most all the other established commissions who already have independent budgets, which is many, we're required to get most of their information in to him on the budget by February 27th. So we're already beyond that. He understands we're new. But he's been very supportive thus far. So that's pretty much it for, again, in terms of the process. It has to go through that city council first. And I mean, I have had experience with them where I would say something simple should have stayed simple and didn't. But I also know enough of the counselors. I feel on this subject pretty confident. But, we've also seen how slow city works, too. So that's why I want to get moving on it fast. So you will probably be seeing more emails than I would normally send to the group and some back and forth, just because I also want to make sure that we're transparent in what we're doing with all the members and in solid agreement as well. So that's pretty much all I can really update you on right now. Is there anybody else with a question about any of it? No. And so
No question.
So again, if I could have a motion to vote on the item categories anyway, just to make sure that we are open and in agreement on.
Move that we initiate discussions on the budget.
Well, I'm thinking more of accept the 4 categories
Okay.
of our
With the
budget.
categories of interest for the commission to pursue.
Have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay. Sounds unanimous. Great. All right. We are finally now hopefully moving forward. Okay. So. All right, I had spoken with, on new business with Nairobi Rose from One Holyoke a couple times. She was supposed to come, if you remember, to our meeting in February, I believe it was. I'm trying to think if it was February, January now. and she didn't, and it was some time before she wrote me and told me she had been very sick. And she still wants to speak with us about, excuse me. She still wants to speak to us about their accessible renovation that they're planning on doing. That it has, I believe, passed the first part of CPA, and they're now in discussion about the finances. So I'm not sure what we can actually do for them other than to kind of guide them in any questions they may have for the ADA responsibilities of the renovation. Most of it appears to be happening on the outside of the building. So I will keep you posted about that. When she asked to come to this meeting, I said, I wrote her back, but then didn't get a response again. So there you go. I don't know what's going on there. I think everybody's pretty busy, crazy now. That's the only thing I can think of. They are one of the organizations. I know that Nairobi does a lot of good things for the community, and that One Holyoke certainly does, and that the city even works with them on things. And they have been held events that I could not attend because it isn't accessible. So I would love to see that happen. And I hope that we'll hear from her again and get more updates. She would definitely be a good person to speak to as we start doing surveys and going down all around Holyoke to try to get a better idea of the sorts of needs, again, our residents that are disabled need. So that's pretty much all I can say on One Holyoke. The only other reason I would bring it up is in terms of, I would love to be able in our budget to help buildings like One Holyoke. But it is my understanding from the state, while it is possible sometimes to use that budget money for nonprofits, that it's really can get hairy. We'll have to do more investigation about how that would come out, or how we could possibly use our budget money at any time to help them. On the second item of new business, state changes to the virtual public meeting law. And I believe that was the 25th, was it? That they were supposed to speak on that?
Yes.
And I know that the mayor sent out a notice about that as well. So I wasn't sure, that virtual is a great thing to have. The Conservation Commission, for instance, here is totally virtual all the time. But for us and the people that we represent, it's really important to continue with hybrid. I know there were several organizations talking, disability rights organizations around the state talking, like Stavros with Governor Healy, about approaches to that. So I put that in there just because, again, is there any feelings anybody has here about it, or how do you feel about the outcome?
I think it makes sense to have a hybrid situation, and I believe that's what they approved, the ability to continue to do that makes sense to me.
And that was my understanding, but I think it's temporary once again. Did I hear that correctly? That it was only for a certain amount of time?
I'm not I thought the article that I read said that they decided to approve that on an ongoing basis. I don't know if there was a time limit on it.
Okay.
There is a 2-year time limit. They extended it to 2027, and they are proposing a bill to make it permanent while it goes through the government.
Yeah. And that was kind of the feeling that I got too. And that was better than what I had heard, because at first, it didn't sound, it sounded like it was going to get rescinded, period. So I'm certainly glad to hear that. Anybody else?
I like
So,
the hybrid.
Yep.
I like the hybrid model.
Well, and the thing is, I keep saying when I talk to people about the issues for those that are disabled, is when we make these improvements, they often are improvements for able-bodied people as well, or temporarily able-bodied folks, or again, moms and dads with baby strollers.
Universal
People-
accessibility,
Yep.
it's a thing.
Yes, it is. If we could only do universal health care, but that's not in our purview. So anyway, I think I'm glad to hear that we're going to continue with that. If there is one thing I believe that came out of COVID, I really kind of hoped when something so diabolical happens to everyone, that they would pull together. The one way they did, I think, was virtual. And disability rights folks around the nation have been trying to encourage businesses to go virtual and to allow people to at least work part of the time at home forever. And they always told us it was too expensive. And then when COVID came, we didn't really have much of a choice. And it turns out it can be done.
Voila, it worked.
Yep. And I love face-to-face personally in almost all things, but it certainly is a great advantage. So good for that. So I don't know. Do we have anything else in terms of new business that anybody else can think of? Or all right, then I move to close out the evening for the Holyoke Commission on Disability.
So moved.
Second?
All right. Good night and stay well.